Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on Granby. My name is Mike Malloy, and I'll be your host this evening. Our guest tonight is Lucian Cascio, a 76-year-old resident of Granby. Thank you for joining us. Lucian. We're going to roll right through this now.
Yeah.
Okay. You live on Donahue?
Donahue, yep.
Donahue Road. Is
Up
that?
near Lost Acres Orchard.
Okay. How long have you lived in Granby?
Well, close to 40 years, I guess.
Okay. I was just unclear whether you were born here or not.
I was born in Hartford.
Okay, great.
Grew up in West Hartford.
All right, so why don't we start out like we do always. What are your, you were born in Hartford. What are your earliest memories of Hartford?
Well, after I was born, I had very few memories
Okay.
as a young person.
Okay.
But when I was 2 years old, we moved into the house I grew up in West Hartford.
Okay, so at 2 you actually moved to Hartford, so your memories of Hartford would be...
West Hartford.
You moved to West Hartford, okay.
Right. And we were somewhere off Mountain Road before that. But then my father had a house built next to the nursery, the Peter Cascio Nursery in West Hartford, and that's where I grew up.
Okay, so you mentioned that you were born in 1934. So in 1936 you moved to West Hartford, or thereabouts.
In 1936, I moved to the house I grew up in West Hartford. I had previously been in West Hartford, somewhere else.
Okay, so how long you lived in Hartford? A very short time, right?
I don't believe I ever lived in Hartford. I was just born there in the hospital.
Oh, I got you. Okay, yeah, that's what was throwing me. Okay, I was going to say. Okay, so you were born in Hartford. You were actually living in West Hartford, and at age 2, you moved to the house where you were raised.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now that we're rolling, we're going to go with it. Okay. So, what are your earliest memories of West Hartford?
Well, we were right near Bishop's Corner.
Okay.
And if you picture Bishop's Corner, where on the southwest corner there, where Lord and Taylor's was for a long time, there was. It was flat. It wasn't hilly like it is now. And there was a little ice cream parlor with a windmill in the front.
Yep.
It's called Dutchland Farms.
Yep.
And behind that, right along Flag Road, which comes in to Albany right there.
Right.
At that point, there was pony rides in behind that.
Like a public pony ride place where you could go and ride a pony?
Yeah.
Okay, like a little carnival.
It may have been just on weekends.
Okay.
No, it was just a little place where you could ride a pony.
Okay.
And I guess pay for the opportunity.
Okay.
And across the street where McDonald's is and all those shops, there was a roadhouse set way back, and near Albany Avenue, there was one of those little gas stations that was just a little glass house where the operator could get out of the weather.
Right.
With a gas pump at either end.
Okay.
And of course, we didn't have to pump our own gas in those days.
Everything was full serve, huh?
That was Bishop's Corner. There may have been a shack over on the southeast corner. There's a mobile station there now.
Okay.
It was sort of a lean-to, and at various times they sold fresh vegetables there. At other times, I think it was used clothing.
So a far cry from what it is today, huh?
Definitely, yeah.
Wow. So it was fairly undeveloped up in that part of the town.
Undeveloped, yeah.
Completely farmland.
Right.
So that's your early. So you went to school in West Hartford. What did you went to elementary school, and do you have any memories of that?
Beach Park School down on Steel Road.
Okay.
And then that was to the 3rd grade, I think. And then Sedgwick School, 3rd through the 6th grade. And then I went to private school in West Hartford, Kingswood,
Okay.
for a couple of years. And then to Loomis in Windsor. I graduated from Loomis.
Oh, great. So you did all. Did you go to Loomis? That was a private school, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why you went out of town.
Yeah.
What any other memories growing up in West Hartford that kind of stick out?
Well, as you can tell from my description of Bishop's Corner, it was a lot different.
Yes.
And we had there was a small pond on our property, and we used to go down there and catch snakes and frogs and things like that, and there was very few people around. There was one kid up on Coolidge Road that I used to play with, but there just weren't many people.
Right. Very undeveloped part of town.
Yeah.
What did your parents do for a living, or what did your?
Well, my father was a landscape nurseryman,
Okay.
and he had a nursery there and later on a garden center,
Right.
and he had crews that went out and did landscaping, and mostly in West Hartford.
Right.
And as time went on, he had about 300 acres of nurseries in Bloomfield and East Granby, Avon, West Hartford. He said that nurserymen, or bush peddlers as they sometimes called them,
Right.
didn't really make much money in selling bushes. It was in real estate. But you buy a piece of land
Grow
and you put trees on it
Yeah.
and grow trees, and that pays the taxes.
Okay.
But then when you sell the land,
Right.
after civilization comes and they demand,
Right.
then you make more money on the land.
Like any kind of farmer, many farmers have retired on their land.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That term peddler was much more common back then.
Peddler?
Peddler, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody who sold anything was a peddler, you know.
Bush peddler?
But, yeah.
Yeah. But you were going to ask me about Granby, because I live in our summer place.
Yeah, well, usually
That's
what I
where
do.
my house is.
I was unclear for a minute whether or not how long you'd been here, and I usually get to that. So we'll get to that very shortly. But wait a minute, that was your summer place for your parents?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's a very, very good time to bring it up. So your home that you're living in now was the summer home that your parents would come to when it was too hot in West Hartford?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I've probably had 10 guests now, of the guests I've interviewed, say that. Not that they were living in their summer home, but they came to Granby or Heartland or East Granby, and that's how they first found the town.
Granby was a summer resort for West Hartford.
As Heartland, evidently, and there was some cottages in East Granby down by the Salmon Brook.
Oh yeah.
That were flooded in '55. But it's interesting because it's kind of a lost kind of pilgrimage, because we have air conditioning now. So a lot of people, they'll go to the beach, but they'll live in their house through the year. Then they used to just flee the city because it was too hot.
Yeah.
So were you on water up there, or were you just in the?
There's a brook. Belden Brook runs right through the backyard.
Okay.
It's about 20 feet away. I
Right.
couldn't build there now.
Yep. No.
And then in the front is a dug pond.
Now you would come up there just obviously during the summers. It wasn't heated or anything, and.
Right. It wasn't
Yeah.
till after World War II
Okay.
that a piece was added on.
Okay.
There was just one room with a pump, an outhouse, and a bunk room with the 6 bunks in it
Right.
for the 6 of us.
So you had your mother and father and three
I
siblings.
have an older sister
Okay.
who's Joan Griswold, who lives in Granby.
Okay.
And my older brother Pete, who lives in Arlington, Virginia. And my twin brother Joe, who lives in Fairfax, Virginia.
Okay. So half the family went to Granby and half the family went to Virginia.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Great. So, what are your memories of coming up here? I mean, when you were a little guy coming up during the summer, anything?
Actually, there's not a lot of early memories because, well, for one reason, we got sent to camp for 8 weeks in Vermont.
So your parents went
for 9 years.
Oh, really? Oh, no kidding.
Probably had a great time without us.
So they were here.
Without my twin brother and I running around.
So were you the only two siblings sent to Vermont, or were they your other brother and sister?
My older brother went there a little bit.
Right.
Not as much as my twin and I.
So they had 8 weeks of quiet in the summer.
Relatively, yeah.
Wow. They were really on vacation.
But my father had a 8mm camera,
Okay.
and so we had films of us splashing around in the pond, and he had a little boat
Great.
and on the pond. And
Did you what did you do? You went to camp, just like a traditional summer camp up there? I mean, swimming and fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it was in Wilmington, Vermont, on a small lake.
Right.
It was called Lake Raponda or Ray's Pond,
Okay.
depending on who you were.
Yeah, was that French or Indian? Which one is? Or they just made they had a hybrid word out of raised pond.
I guess so, yeah. Make it sound more elegant.
A really fancy place. Yeah. Was it fun?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned to sail and canoe and row and swim, and I turned the sailbait over, and the mast got stuck in the mud, so it was quite a job to get it out of there.
Oh yeah.
Couldn't turn it back up.
I got lodged right in the mud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what? Now you said your dad did landscaping. How or nursery peddling? I guess the summer wasn't the busy season for him. He was actually able to just leave for the summer. Or he had people running the business for him.
Well, he didn't stay out in Granby.
Oh, so he would commute?
Yeah, he would commute, and my mother and whatever kids were around would
Oh wow.
stay out there.
Sounds
yeah.
like fun.
Yeah.
So, your earliest memories of Granby were around basically summer memories. You didn't come up there in the winter, I would assume. School.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we jump back just a little bit? So you graduate high school, and where do you head?
Went to Cornell, and to study civil engineering, and left there after one semester and went into the Army.
Okay.
And learned to be a high-speed radio operator, and they flew me over to Germany, and that was in 1955, 54, 55, and I was over there protecting you and your family from the Red Horde,
Yep.
who were coming in from Czechoslovakia. And
Yeah, I was 10 years still to come, but yeah, you protected
protected your parents.
the great United States from the Red Horde that never really came, huh?
Yeah.
But they were on full alert over there for many years.
Yeah, we sort of patrolled the border. Yeah.
Do you have any memories of being over there that were kind of stand out? I mean, anything that struck you as quite a culture shock for a young American going to.
Well, it was interesting because it was post World War II, and the war was over in '45, and this was just about 10 years later. and there had been some rebuilding in Germany,
Right.
but there were also other places that were just sort of capped, a foundation hole that would cover it over, and there'd be piles of, everything was very neat,
Right.
but there'd be piles of brick where the building had been,
Right.
that sort of thing. And
So it's still a work in progress.
yeah,
Yeah.
the people, and of course, everything was very old over there.
Yeah.
But it was nice. I spent time with some German families,
Okay.
and
So you actually stayed with them?
no, but
Oh,
I
you just-
I visit. I get I'd be off for a day, or I go into the city and somehow connected up with some families. Would go in. They had big gardens outside Frankfurt, community gardens,
Right.
and a lot more formal than what we have here in Granby.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have your own section, and it'd be fenced in. You'd have a little shed there, a little building, and
Really?
probably a picnic table, and so the gardens were divided up that way.
So it was a public plot designated for you that they had.
I suppose there was some ownership involved.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah.
So it's a true town garden. Yes.
Right, because in the city, there was no space for gardening.
Right.
These old cities are all,
Yeah. Yeah. They used to. Well. Okay. So you were on a base, but you were able to travel around. And Frankfurt's supposed to be a beautiful city.
nice old city, yeah.
Yeah. So when you were over there, did you get out to travel out of Germany at all? Sometimes you had
I
opportunity.
took one leave down through Italy
Okay.
with two other guys. There was a fellow from Iowa and a fellow from Missouri, I think. And since my father was born in Sicily, I was the spokesperson
Okay.
in Italy.
Could you speak Italian at all? No.
Well, a couple of words.
A few words. Hello. Goodbye. That kind of stuff.
But at that point, they were probably more interested in the money I had to spend than how well I treated the language.
Yeah. Right. They were very nice if you were spending. Right. No, I'm sure. I've heard Italy is a really beautiful place to travel through.
Oh yeah, and just fascinating old stuff.
Yeah. Right. A lot of history.
The Pitti Palace and the Il Duomo and the St. Peter's, and I got to see what was it? Can't think of it now because at 76 I'm losing some of the gray.
Yeah, that's
gray
okay.
cells.
That's
But it was
we take whatever you got.
one of the popes. Was
One of the
there.
popes you actually saw, were able to see him. Yeah. Did you make it all the way down to Sicily?
No,
No, that's a long ways.
made it down to Naples,
Okay.
and it's a lot poorer the further you get south,
Southern Italy. Yeah.
and it was kind of depressing down in Naples.
Was it?
At least where I was.
Well,
And-
northern Italy has a very big manufacturing base, huh? And it's less so as you go south.
I don't know. The factories weren't on my tour.
Right. You were a kid trying to have fun, right?
I was, yeah. Well, I was looking at the old buildings and
The history.
the history. And then I went Florence and Rome and Venice. Venice was interesting, and walked up in the Campanile, the bell tower next to St. Peter's,
Oh, wow.
and it's right. The Adriatic goes right around there,
Okay.
and it was in the winter. It was cold and windy up in the top of that
Right.
tower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful place. You had a lot of memories from there.
Yeah.
So you come back from Germany, and where do you go?
I went to. I came back about at the end of my enlistment because the 4th Infantry Division was being disbanded.
Okay.
And so I got out 2 months early down in New Jersey. And one of the fellows I had met in Germany had two of them actually had been at Kenyon College in Ohio.
Okay.
And so I went there when I got out.
To continue your civil engineering studies? Yeah.
And then after Kenyon, I came back into the nursing business with my father.
Okay.
And so I had about a 20-year career with my father, and then I...
So this takes us all the way up into the 70s.
in '69, I went into data processing at the Hartford Insurance Group,
Okay, so, all right.
and I worked there till 1988.
Okay.
Got early retirement and started doing some volunteering at Hartford Hospital and got into the nursing business.
Okay.
So, and I've been...
So you've had like 3 different careers.
Yeah, so I've been a nurse's aide, a home health aide for McLean for 22 years now.
What? It's almost like you have a 20-year cycle.
Yeah.
What are you going to do next?
I haven't received any offers.
Okay. All right. So getting back to you came back from Germany and you worked with your dad. Did you live in West Hartford at that point, or did you?
Well, I lived in the house in West Hartford,
Okay.
and then
So how long did you live there? What year did you leave West Hartford?
I guess I was in my early 30s.
And did you come right to Granby?
You know, I got married,
Okay.
and we lived in Avon on Nod Road. My father had bought a farm there on Nod Road,
Okay.
which is now a golf course.
Okay.
And I lived there for a few years. That's where my son was born.
Okay.
And that was from there that I went to work at the Hartford.
Okay. So you have 2 children. What are their names?
I have a son, Christopher.
And you have a daughter?
Well, a stepdaughter.
Stepdaughter. Okay.
Yeah, from my first marriage. And
What was her name?
her name's Lisa Allard. She lives
Okay.
in Canton.
All right.
And my son, Christopher, lives in Texas,
Oh wow. Okay.
the outskirts of Dallas.
So
And he has 2 children.
So you're in Avon. Where do you go? When did you leave Avon? Or where did you?
I think.
I'm just hopscotching you to get you to Granby. Just filling in the.
I may have gone from there to Granby.
Okay. So you said you lived in Granby for what year did you move to Granby?
I don't know,
Approximately.
but it was about 40 years ago, maybe a little less.
Okay, so we're in the let's see, that would be 1970, thereabouts. So right around that whole time that you started working for the insurance company, or shortly thereafter, a few years after.
Yeah, it must have been couple of years after that.
Okay, so thinking back to that era, when you came to Granby, did you move right to the home that you're living in now, the summer home that your parents? Yeah. Okay, so you went right there, and what were your first impressions of Granby going back 40 years when you finally lived here? What would you say was if there's anything that strikes you as being your first impressions? Obviously, you had.
Well, it's a nice, quiet town.
Right.
And there's been a lot of changes since then. Most of them pretty subtle.
Okay.
But the intersection where Hartford Avenue comes up,
Right.
that's changed a bit. There used to be a big old store there.
Right in the center.
In the center. And
Where was the store in relation to the way the roads come together now?
189? Well, it would have been probably on the end of 189.
So right where the phone company or
No, on the other side.
Oh, okay. So
Where the road is, and so it came out more northerly.
Oh, so they built that intersection. It used to go straight through. It was a straight through the crossroads there, instead of having to turn right like you do now.
I guess it was more angled.
Yeah.
Or,
So there was a
because Route 10 didn't change, but the tennis court was there.
oh,
The
one
tennis court and the monument.
Right.
But I don't know.
So there was a supermarket there. What was the name of the supermarket? Remember?
Well, it wasn't a supermarket in the current sense,
Okay.
but there was, at that time, actually, it was more of a secondhand furniture store.
Oh.
But
It was just a store.
in my sister's memory, my sister's 6 years older, and she's lived in Granby longer.
Mm-hmm.
It was a, and she was here more in the summer than I was.
Okay.
I guess that's when because she wrote something, I think for the library about memories, or the Historical Society, somebody.
Yep.
And it included going to that store, and there was probably sawdust on the floor. That's the way they did it those days. So it was an old, there'd be a meat market in the corner, and
Okay.
Maybe selling groceries over here. It may have been like the one in West Hartford that I remember. It seemed like more of a cooperative store, where there'd be a cheese man would have his section, and the butcher would have their section, and
Interesting. Yeah. More like the old traditional marketplace where you'd
Yeah.
have 3 or 4 or whatever different vendors sharing the space.
right.
Huh. So okay. So that was must have been a hub of the town at some point.
Yeah, but you could get a lot more accurate information from the Historical Society.
Okay, no, that's fine. We're just trying to get an overview. So, looking back to that era, I guess you kind of touched on this real quickly. What would you say is the biggest change from then till now?
Well, there's a lot more people,
Right, right.
a lot more houses, and gas is more expensive.
Quite a bit. Yeah,
I can remember when gas was 25 cents a gallon,
I bet.
and for 25 cents you got your oil checked and your windshield washed, and
You got a lot more for that 25 cents, huh? Yeah, I bet. So, okay, is there anything that like specific to the town that changed that you think is good? I mean, what would be the best change you'd say from when you first came?
well, you're asking for evaluations that I'm really not prepared.
No, that's okay. I'm
prepared
just,
for it.
whatever. I'm just throwing questions out there, whatever. Is there anything you'd like to see that hasn't changed? I mean, that's always that's another evaluation. But is there anything that we always try to just kind of get a broad picture of? You've been here a long time. You lived in different towns, so it's always interesting to see if there's something people think would be nice to see, or some amenity or feature that would be. Granby's got a pretty wide, diverse.
It's a great town because of course, the game preserve and
Right.
and the land trust have saved so much of the land that the farmers are gradually abandoning.
Right.
I'd love to see this Women's Farmers Association starting up. I don't know if you noticed that.
No,
in
I
the paper.
didn't know about that.
But there are a lot of women involved in farming of one type or another
In Granby.
in the Granbys
Okay.
and Heartland, and with a dairy cows and goats and
Huh.
making cheese from and the goats for meat
Right.
and a lot of growers of vegetables.
So small farms that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't hear about that. That's they have the community farm up at the what's the name of the big
Holcomb Farm?
Holcomb Farm, yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of professional women farmers connected with that, and nearby there's the garlic farm and yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, it's good to see any sort of development of that sort of part of the society.
Well, of course, it's a theory of mine that the women who are farming, a lot of them probably have men that go into Hartford to work, or
Right.
are in businesses. So the farm is not necessarily supporting the family.
Right.
Although that's not the same with that dairy farm on East Street.
Yeah, there are some true farm businesses in town
that are wholly involved with the farm. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But I think you're right. I think the small farms tend to have another income, but it seems to be a growing trend that there's more and more of these small organic or specialty farms that might not support the family, but they seem to be popping up.
I think organic is one of the key words.
Right.
That there's a lot more interest and people willing to pay for organic food, and so it's being grown.
I guess the demand's creating the supply. Well, that's good. Yeah, that's interesting. You've been involved in town here for 40 years. Is there any characters that you remember that kind of strike you? Because I always ask that question because everybody has some story about some man or woman that they knew that may not be with us anymore, but somebody that stands out in your.
Well, of course, John Avery is still with us.
Okay.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
I see him. I think he's not using his walker anymore. I think, but he's had a tough time physically. He had a little store right behind the Averys are a big name in Granby.
I've heard the name. Yeah.
But John had a little store behind the tennis court in the center of town there.
Okay.
Right now there's a barber shop and an ice cream store in there.
Oh, that little plaza, the mini plaza there. Yeah.
Yeah, that he had a store in there.
Right.
And it was a you could. I bought boots from him, and I think probably some dungarees and
Like a clothing store?
clothing and tools, and it was sort of. He probably had non-perishable food in there too, and
Okay.
it was sort of a general store.
Right.
And he's a nice guy. I had the feeling that he was taken advantage of because you get a couple of kids come in there from the school, and one of them would ask for something that was down in the basement, and so the kid upstairs might pocket something. While
He was a little too trusting. Huh?
very trusting guy.
Yeah.
Very trusting guy, but awfully nice. The whole family's nice. Avery's, yeah. But there are a number of old families around town, and as you can tell, Granby was not just a summer resort because there's some fine old houses
Up Main Street and throughout town.
like
huh?
the bed and breakfast.
Okay, right on 10 and 202.
That
Yep, that's a big house.
Yeah, and the Hardcastles had that house for many years, but they bought it from Mary. Mind.
It's okay.
Anyway, Mary left some land up off of Donahue Road,
Okay.
and her family. Mary never married, but her family lives in Hartford,
Okay.
and that was their summer house.
Oh, okay. That
Yeah.
big place was their summer house.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
And
People don't understand that there was a lot of really wealthy people that lived in Hartford in that era. I mean, they tended to move to the suburbs, and especially just before the war.
well, Hartford was like that. You can see originally the wealthy people lived down by the Connecticut River,
Okay.
and there was my father's lawyer lived on Main Street
Right.
in Hartford. Lost his name, but his house is now historical. Like he and his sister lived there,
Right.
and then they gradually moved up west,
Right.
and you get a little higher ground,
Yep.
and you find a stream like Prospect Avenue
Mm-hmm.
was one of those, and there were some streets in Hartford before Prospect
Mm-hmm.
that are lined with nice old homes,
Right. Right.
and then you Prospect Avenue, and eventually
You're in West Hartford. After.
West Hartford Mountain Road, West
Right.
Hartford, and then up on Avon Mountain.
Yeah, that was the era that the whole Elizabeth Park area was developed too. So
Yeah.
that was probably part of those
Yeah.
wealthy families wanting to have a place to play. So that's yeah.
Yeah, the Elizabeth Park is that's a wonderful.
It's beautiful.
And it's fortunate that the city of Hartford is still willing to maintain that.
Yeah, it's a treasure. It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that part of that's in West Hartford, right, or is that all in Hartford?
No, Prospect Avenue runs through it, and west of Prospect is West Hartford.
Okay.
But in most of the park, at least most of the park that's used
Right.
is in West Hartford.
Okay.
But I believe that it's maintained by City of Hartford. Maybe they own that. I don't know what the deal
I
is.
think this is weird because I think like where that pond house is, I think there's a little slice that's actually in West Hartford there, but I may be wrong. But regardless, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
We always try to circle back and try to get some feel for, we touched off some of the common questions, but is there anything that, one of the questions that always fascinates me is when, at your point in life, you've experienced a lot, you've lived in a couple different places, and you've got some varied experiences. Is there any advice that you would give to kids growing up today, in terms of, if you could summarize your wisdom of 76 years into I mean, it's kind of a heavy question to ask on the fly here, but is there anything that is a recurring theme that you see that you feel like kids should take heed of, or just general advice that you would give to young children or kids growing up today?
I think wish I'd had time to think about this, but
Yeah, no,
I would say concentrate less on partying
okay.
and frivolous stuff, and
Yeah.
think more about what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Okay.
And as I told my granddaughter, who just turned 18, who's very bright,
Mhm.
and I said, she's working as a dental hygienist. And I said, look at the dentist and look at yourself.
Right.
The difference between the two of you is education and time.
Right.
That's the only difference.
Right.
Because she's just as bright as they are,
Yeah. Yeah.
but she hasn't, and she did some work, and she did some clinical work in the hospital.
Right.
And the difference between her and the doctors or the nurses is just education and time.
Right. Right.
So if you want to be a doctor, there's no reason why you can't be. It's just you have to invest in the education and spend the time and do it, the
Right.
energy. And nowadays, throughout the world,
Right.
if you want to make a good living, you'll need a degree.
Right.
You need a good education.
Just to compete. Even just to compete.
Right.
I mean, it's a very well-educated world out there.
Of course, if you're an entrepreneur and politician like you, then maybe you don't need a degree, but you need to
No,
need
still-
to hustle.
Well, you still have to have the experience, and you've had to have acquired the knowledge somewhere. It may not be in school, but you have to have put in the time to either read or engage the world in a way that's a learning experience.
Maybe I should ask you that question. What do you think kids need to do?
No, they're not supposed to turn it around on me. I'm just fascinated by what you just said, because basically it kind of I feel very strongly about what the wisdom of somebody who's been through it, and my take is that one of the stories of America is they always tell you can be anything you want to be, but they don't tell you can also be nothing if you don't do something.
Right.
Because the flip side of that is often the case. You're playing catch up because you didn't have a plan like what you're talking about.
Right.
But I think it's fascinating the way you just clarified that, because what you did was you just laid it out for her very simply. And it has to be simple, I think, for it to really resonate with someone. But what you're saying,
It's work.
It's work, but it's also just time. It's a fascinating way to kind of frame it, because you can invest 3, 4, 6 years of your life and really immeasurably improve your lot for the rest of your life.
Right.
Or you can, like you said, party, or take it easy in your early years and spend the rest of your life playing catch up. It's really an investment in yourself. And I think that's a fascinating way to frame it. I mean, it's...
Yeah, if you want to be a good golfer, you should probably become a doctor first.
That's absolutely right. Or a boater.
Then you'll have the time.
That's right. Or anything, really.
Yeah.
I think kids get wrapped up in the immediate and what they can satisfy today, which is part of youth, right? I mean, that's one of the.
Yeah, and if you want to learn to be at ease with people,
Yeah,
then spend more time with people
that's absolutely true.
and less time texting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because then the real person might actually scare you if you can't type it into your screen, right?
I just wonder if people will forget how to communicate face to face.
Right.
It's scary.
That's a very interesting, another fascinating subject you bring up. I think that at some point there'll be some pushback. There'll be a generation coming along not too far in the future that's going to say, we reject all of this because it's taken the humanity out of, I think at this point it's just so new. It's like any technology, you kind of, you don't even know what you're ingesting at first. And then you realize what the pluses and minuses are and you evolve. But I don't know. It's definitely an interesting question. So, well, if there's anything else that you feel like talking about, especially in relation to your impressions or experiences in Granby or anything that we haven't touched on that you find yourself talking about when you're not on TV.
Getting back to the agriculture.
Yeah.
I think it's great that, as you say, some people are interested in doing that.
Right.
Like Lost Acres Orchard, for instance.
Okay.
There's a couple who bought that orchard quite a few years ago,
Right.
and they're both hardworking. Tom was busy in industry. He may be still connected to that, but he's basically retired, and they've maintained that orchard in wonderful shape, and the daughter opened a shop in Granby with food, which she'd love to cook, and they built her a shop in the orchard.
Oh, wow.
And her mother runs that now, because the daughter went to having babies and things like that
Right.
occupies the time.
Having a life. Or a different kind of life, I should say.
And they're into quilting, and it's just a wonderful operation, and it's maintained that orchard
Oh, wow. That's
for
beautiful.
years and years.
Yeah.
And there's so many other people around. Now there's a vineyard almost next door to that, which is starting up, and will.
Yeah, I think I think I know the people that started that. Yeah, but that's it's fascinating to see that sort of rebirth of small kind of farming. And I think, like we said before, I think it's the organic or demand for those sorts of specialty products that really makes it viable. Also, you have to have some, like you said, if you want to be a golfer, you should become a doctor first. Well, if you want to be a farmer, it's not a bad idea to become a doctor first, because it's not often going to pay all the bills,
Well, the veterinarians own some of the dairy farms.
Do they?
Or they did, anyway. But that the dairy farm on East Street, I was talking to one of the boys there who runs it, and boys, he's probably 50. He said the way the government controls the price of milk, they get less money for the milk than it costs them to produce it. So they must have a couple hundred white goats there.
Right.
That produce, of course, goat milk.
Right.
And they've gotten into the cheese business.
Okay.
So besides losing money on the milk,
Right.
which I believe is also a lot of it is used to make cheese.
Huh.
But they don't, I mean, the cheese they make, I think, is from the goat's milk.
Right. Right.
But I really don't have any information on this. It's just,
No, it sounds like you've got a little niche interest in these small farms, regardless.
yeah, well, I think it's just great that they're doing it. I just,
Yeah.
and so they're making cheese, and another child of this family,
Right.
he's over at 189. They're growing goats also,
Okay.
and they have meat goats and dairy goats,
Oh, interesting. Huh.
and around Hartford and Springfield, other places, there's a lot of people from Caribbean and other countries where goat meat is popular.
More of a staple of their diet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
So that's apparently a growing business.
Interesting. Well, you've certainly shared some interesting little side stories about what's going on in Granby with us tonight, Lucian. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your parts of your life story and your interests and observations on the town. Appreciate you coming in tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Once again, thanks for joining us here tonight. It's Reflections on Granby. This is our second guest from Granby. Is a continuing interview series of folks from East Granby, Granby, and Heartland, and we appreciate you joining us here tonight as we share yet another story of one of our residents. Thank you, and have a good night.